You weren't supposed to survive the second attempt. The words hung in the archive room longer than they should have. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Second attempt, I repeated. What was the first? The woman glanced toward the aisle behind her. Beep. Once, fast, then back to me. 2 years ago, she said. The hospitalization you just read about. That was amnesia, dissociative. The doctor wrote it himself. He wrote what he was told to write. I gripped the folder against my chest. Beep. My pulse hadn't slowed since she'd spoken. Who are you? Someone who taught you not to answer that question honestly to strangers. A faint smile. Not cruel, tired. Beep. So I won't insult you by pretending I will. You knew my handwriting. I taught you to trust it more than your own face in a mirror. I thought of the notebook, the columns. Facts, claims, evidence. Beep. The sentence that had written itself before I decided to write it. Never investigate people. Investigate contradictions. I said slowly. Not mine. I didn't invent that rule. I copied it. Something shifted in her expression. Beep. Not surprise. Relief, the way a teacher looks when a student finally solves the problem without being told. You always said it was yours, she said quietly. I never corrected you. Beep. It was more useful if you believed it. Why? Because I wasn't going to be there to keep saying it. The sentence landed heavier than it should have, for 2 strangers standing in a records room. Beep. I felt it anyway. A pull somewhere beneath memory, in the place where the backpack and the mirror had already proven that my body remembered things my mind had lost. 2 years ago, I said. Beep. What actually happened to me? She stepped closer, her voice further. You'd found an account. 12 names, 4 of them dead, all of them connected to money that shouldn't have existed. Beep. You were 3 weeks from finishing the paper trail. She paused. Someone decided finishing wasn't an option. Poisoned? Something slower. Beep. Something that looks exactly like trauma-induced amnesia if a doctor isn't looking for anything else. Her jaw tightened. Dr. Collins looked for something else. Beep. That's why his name isn't on your current chart anymore. I remember the name from the folder in my hands. Dr. Henry Collins, attending physician, 2 years ago. Is he alive? She didn't answer that, which was itself an answer. Beep. And the crash, I said. That was the second attempt. That was the second attempt succeeding at something and failing at everything else. She almost smiled again. They erased 2 years of your memory. Beep. They didn't erase the part of you that already knew how to work without it. I thought of the columns in my notebook, the instructions in Sophia's safe, the train ticket, the backpack no one could account for. I prepared for this, I said. Beep. Not a question anymore. You prepared for exactly this. Footsteps. Distant, but coming closer, unhurried, the particular rhythm of someone who belonged in the hallway and wasn't trying to hide it. The woman's posture changed instantly. Not fear. Beep. Calculation. I have to go. Wait, Emma, I said, before I understood why I was saying it. Who is Emma? For the first time, something cracked in her composure. Grief, quick and unguarded, gone almost before I could name it. Beep. She was better at this than either of us, the woman said. She trusted the wrong person for 4 seconds. Beep. That's all it takes. Is she dead? Ask Sophia what's in the envelope you told her never to open before chapter. She stopped herself, shook her head once, sharp, as if correcting a habit. Beep. Before you were ready. The footsteps were nearly at the aisle's end. She pressed something small and cold into my palm. A brass key, old, with a paper tag tied to the loop, the ink faded but legible. Ashwood, storage 14. Beep. Don't tell them where you got this, she said. Tell them you found it in the folder. It's close enough to true. Who should I trust? She looked at me with an expression I would spend the next several days trying to translate. Not warmth exactly. Beep. Something closer to respect for a person she wasn't sure would survive her own investigation. Trust the method, she said, not the people. Beep. Not even me. Then she turned down the far end of the aisle and was gone before the clerk rounded the corner with a stack of returned folders under her arm. Miss Shu? The clerk blinked at me. Beep. You're not supposed to be standing this long. I was just leaving, I said. I closed my hand around the key until the metal bit into my skin. 9 unaccounted minutes before the crash, a backpack that vanished between 2 cameras. Beep. A memo written 3 days after I disappeared. Beep. And now, a woman who taught me a rule I'd claimed as my own, a name that made my hand shatter glass before my mind understood why, and a key to a room in the one place someone had already tried to lure me toward once. Beep. I didn't know yet whether Ashwood was a trap, but for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I understood something with total clarity. I hadn't woken up in the middle of my story. Beep. I had woken up in the middle of a plan I'd already built for myself. And someone else was reading from the same blueprint, 1 page ahead of me. I didn't tell them about the woman. Not the whole truth, anyway. Beep. By the time I returned to my room, Sophia was pacing beside the window, phone in hand, and Lucas was sitting exactly where he'd been 20 minutes earlier, which told me, more than anything he could have said, that he hadn't left to follow me. Beep. Where were you? Sophia asked. The archive. I let the folder speak for itself, setting it on the bed. I found my admission record from 2 years ago. Sophia read the diagnosis, then the physician's name, and went very still. Beep. Henry Collins, she said. I know that name. From where? He testified in a licensing hearing 18 months ago, then he stopped practicing. Her mouth flattened into a thin line. Beep. I assumed retirement. I don't think it was retirement. I watched her carefully as I said it. No reaction beyond professional concern. The look of a lawyer recalculating a case, not a woman protecting a secret. Beep. Lucas, on the other hand, had gone rigid the moment I said the word second attempt before I'd even explained what they meant. Say that again, he said. There was a first attempt, I said, watching him now instead of Sophia. 2 years ago. Beep. Someone made it look like ordinary amnesia. Lucas's face didn't perform anything. It simply drained, the way skin does when the mind is somewhere else, entirely recalculating 2 years of sentence once again against 1 new sentence. You're certain, he said. Beep. It wasn't really a question. No, I'm not certain of anything. Telling you what the file suggests. 2 years ago, I thought. He started again. I thought you'd finally broken. From work, from exhaustion. Beep. I never. His hands closed slowly into fists on his knees. I never once considered someone did that to you on purpose. I believed him. Not because he sounded convincing. Beep. Because he sounded like a man discovering he had failed to protect someone in a way he hadn't known was possible to fail. That, too, went into the notebook, later, in a hand steadier than my heartbeat. Beep. Lucas, reaction to second attempt was new information. Not confirmation. Genuine. Beep. Adrienne arrived 40 minutes later, carrying takeout he hadn't been asked to bring, the kind of gesture that meant either love or guilt. And I had stopped assuming I could tell the difference by instinct alone. I told him a different version. Beep. I found something in the archive, I said. A folder about a company. Ashwood Holdings. There was no such company in the folder. Beep. I'd invented it on the walk back, testing the rule the woman had given me before I understood I'd be using it within the hour. Adrienne set the food down carefully. Ashwood, he repeated. You've heard of it? No. A beat too long. Beep. Should I have? I don't know yet. He recovered his smile quickly, too quickly, the same practiced warmth from the first day. But his eyes had already gone to the drawer beside my bed, checking, the way they always did, before returning to my face. Beep. Adrienne reacted to a name I invented. Recovery time faster than Lucas's, but the initial flicker was real. I didn't know yet what it meant, only that it meant something. Daniel called that evening, his voice as unhurried as ever. Beep. I traced the recipient account, he said. The 12.8 million. And it routes through a holding company registered 11 months ago. A pause, papers shifting on his end of the line. Beep. Ashwood Trade and Logistics. My hand tightened on the phone. Where is it headquartered? Ashwood Station District. A warehouse office, according to the filing. No employees on record. No website. Beep. The registered agent is a law firm that dissolves under new names every 18 months, which is, for the record, either very sophisticated tax planning or something considerably less legal. The train ticket, I said quietly. Beep. It wasn't just a message. It was an address, Daniel said, disguised as a memory. I looked at the brass key still hidden in my palm, the paper tag curling slightly from the warmth of my hand. Ashwood, storage 418. Sophia noticed my silence. Beep. What is it? I made a decision then that felt less like courage and more like the continuation of an old habit, one I hadn't chosen, one that had chosen me 2 years earlier, in a life I couldn't remember living. Nothing yet, I said. Beep. I want to see it before I explain it. Lucas studied me for a long moment. You've found something in that folder you're not telling us. I found a rule, I said. Trust the method. Beep. Not the people. Do you trust me? I trust that you didn't know about the first attempt until 10 minutes ago. I met his eyes. That's not the same question. He accepted that. Which, oddly, made me trust him a little more. Beep. That night, after the room had emptied and the monitor had returned to its patient rhythm, I opened the notebook to a fresh page and wrote a single line beneath the date. 9 unaccounted minutes led to a person. A person led to a company. Beep. A company led to a station. The station has a room with my name on the key. I underlined the last sentence twice. Then, for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I fell asleep without dreaming of a heartbeat. Beep. I dreamed of a warehouse instead. The doctor had cleared me for 20 minutes. No stairs, no stress. Beep, beep. I used the 20 minutes to walk out the side entrance into a car Sophia had reluctantly agreed to drive, on the condition that she came inside with me and Daniel stayed on the phone the entire time. Beep. If anything feels wrong, she said, gripping the wheels, we leave immediately. Agreed. Ashwood Station hadn't changed in whatever version of it existed in my missing memory. Gray platform, a single ticket booth, unmanned. Beep. Beyond it, a row of warehouses with faded numbers, stenciled above rusted doors. Storage 14 sat at the end of the row, its padlock newer than the door it guarded. The key turned on the first try. Beep. Inside, dust undisturbed in a pattern that told its own quiet story. A single path swept clean through the center of the room, as though someone visited regularly but touched nothing on either side. At the back, a metal filing cabinet. Unlocked. Beep. Inside the top drawer, a single folder, and beneath it, a framed photograph face down. I turned the photograph over firstest. Adrienne standing beside a man I didn't recognize, in front of this exact warehouse, both of them shaking hands. Beep. The timestamp printed in the corner read a date 6 days before my accident. Sophia went very quiet beside me. Beep. That's not proof of anything, she said, too fast. This way people speak when they're trying to convince themselves before they convince anyone else. I opened the folder. Bank statements. Beep. The same 12.8 million transfers had shown me, traced now to a final destination. An account with Adrienne's full legal name listed as beneficiary. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than the document did. Beep. He lied, I said quietly. About the backpack, about Ashwood, about all of it. Anna, he said he'd never heard of this place. I held up the photograph. Beep. He was standing in front of it. For one long moment, standing in that dust-swept warehouse with proof in my hands, I felt something close to relief. Not happiness, certainty. The particular dangerous comfort of a question finally closing. Beep. I had found him. The man who had built the maze, signed the transfer, worn the mask of a grieving husband for 2 weeks, while quietly checking drawers and bedside tables for whatever I might have hidden. Beep. Sophia photographed everything with her phone, methodical even in her shock, while I stood holding the frame, replaying every gentle smile Adrienne had given me since the moment I opened my eyes. I had believed some of those smiles. Beep. That, more than the money, was what I couldn't forgive yet. We should go, Sophia said. Now. Before what? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Beep. We left the way we'd come, the folder tucked inside Sophia's coat, the photograph wrapped in my scarf. The warehouse door locked again behind us, as though nothing had ever been disturbed. Beep. In the car, Daniel's voice came through the speaker, low and careful. Send me everything the moment you're back, he said. I'll verify the account numbers against the routing I already have. It's him, Sophia said. Beep. Daniel, it's Adrienne. There was a pause on the line. Longer than I expected from a man who never hesitated. Maybe, Daniel said finally. Verify first. Celebrate later. I barely heard him. Beep. Beep. I was already composing, in my mind, the conversation I would have with Adrienne that evening, the questions I would ask, the silence I would watch cross his face when he understood. I finally knew. Beep. For the first times in 11 days, I felt like I was ahead of the story instead of trapped inside it. I should have remembered my own rule. Trust the method, not the certainty it hands you. I didn't remember it in time. Beep. Daniel called 4 hours later. I could tell from the first word that something had changed. The account, he said. The one listed as beneficiary. What about it? It was opened 3 weeks ago. I sat up slowly. That's not possible. Beep. The transfer happened 7 days before the crash. That's over 2 months ago. Exactly, Daniel said. The account receiving credit for a transfer from 2 months ago didn't exist until 3 weeks ago. Beep. Someone backdated the paperwork inside that folder. Badly, if you know what to check. The relief I'd felt in the warehouse curdled into something colder. The photograph, I said. Send me the original file, not a photo of a photo. Beep. I want the metadata. Sophia was already pulling it from her coat, hands unsteady now in a way they hadn't been in the warehouse. 20 minutes later, Daniel spoke again, quieter this time. The image file was created 11 days ago, he said. Beep. 1 day after your accident, the room went very still. Beep. Someone printed a photograph of Adrienne, I said slowly, at a place he may have visited for entirely unrelated reasons, standing next to a stranger, and staged it inside a locked room with a key that was handed to me by a woman I'd never met before yesterday. That's the read I'm getting too, Daniel said. Beep. She told me not to tell you where I got the key, I said. I told you I found it in the folder. Sophia looked at me sharply. You lied to me. I tested a rule, I said. It worked. Beep. Someone knew exactly which building I'd walk into, exactly which drawer I'd open, and exactly what conclusion they wanted me to reach when I opened it. Which means, Lucas said from the doorway, I hadn't heard him come in. Someone knew you'd received that key before you told any of us you had it. Beep. The four of us looked at each other in a silence that had a shape to it now. Beep. Heavier than suspicion. Closer to certainty that the wrong kind of certainty was exactly what someone wanted from me. The woman in the archive, I said. She gave me the key. Beep, beep. She could have set the room herself. Or she gave you a real key to a room someone else prepared, Lucas said, because she knew you'd trust a rule more than a person. I thought of her voice. Trust the method. Not the people. Not even me. Beep. Had that been a warning about Adrienne? Or a warning about herself? Sfonazist. Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and went pale in a way I hadn't seen from her since the day Daniel first laid the bank transfer across my hospital blanket. Beep. What? I asked. She turned the phone toward me, an unknown number, a single message sent 4 minutes ago. You checked the wrong drawer. Third time won't look like an accident either. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Beep. Outside the window, evening traffic moved past in its ordinary rhythm, indifferent to the fact that somewhere among 4 people I had chosen to trust, someone already knew everything I'd done that day, before I'd told a single one of them where I'd been. Beep. I picked up my notebook and wrote, my hand steadier than it had any right to be. Confirmed someone is watching in real time. Confirmed the warehouse was staged for me specifically. Unconfirmed whether Adrienne is guilty or simply useful to frame. Beep. Unconfirmed whether the woman from the archive is protecting me or measuring how easily I still fall for a clean answer. I closed the notebook. Whoever had sent that message wanted me afraid. Beep. They had underestimated one thing about the version of me currently living in this body. The one thing every person in this room, including Adrienne, had told me without meaning to. Beep. I had never, in either life I couldn't remember, been the kind of woman who stopped asking questions because someone told her to be frightened. I looked up at the 3 faces watching me. We're not done, I said. Beep. We're just finally being watched by someone who's worried that we might actually finish. I didn't wait until morning. Beep. I asked Sophia to leave the photograph and the folder locked in her car. And I asked Lucas to stand outside the door. Not because I distrusted him in that moment, but because some questions only work when asked by one person to another with nothing else in the room to perform for. Beep. Adrienne arrived at 9, carrying nothing this time. No flowers, no takeout. As though some part of him already knew gestures wouldn't help tonight. I placed the photograph on the blanket between us. He looked at it for a long time before he spoke. Beep. Where did you get this? Does it matter? It matters whether I should be angry at whoever gave it to you, or grateful. That wasn't the answer of a man caught. It was the answer of a man doing arithmetic. Beep. You told me you'd never heard of Ashwood, I said. I lied, no hesitation this time. That, more than anything, unsettled me. Beep. I've been to that warehouse 3 times in the last 2 months. For what? He rubbed his eyes, and for a moment he looked older than he had in any of the 11 days since I'd woken up. 6 months ago you stopped sleeping, he said. Beep. You started locking your laptop in a safe I didn't have the combination to chew. You told me, once, that if anything ever happened to you, I shouldn't trust the official explanation. Beep. And then you never mentioned it again, and I made the mistake every husband makes. I decided not to push. So you hired someone. A man named Reyes. Private investigator. Beep beep. I paid him to follow you without your knowledge because you'd made it very clear you didn't want my help, and I wasn't willing to give you the option of refusing it. His jaw tightened. Rise traced money moving through an account. Beep. He led me to Ashwood. I went to see it myself because I didn't trust a stranger's word about my own wife's safety. The man in the photograph, shaking your hand. Rise. I studied the picture again. Beep. 2 men, ordinary posture, no urgency in either of them. It could have been exactly what he described. It could also have been exactly what someone wanted it to look like, now that they knew I'd seen it. Where is Reyes now? I asked. Beep. Adrienne's expression changed. Not guilt. Something closer to the fear I'd seen flicker across his face on the first day, when Lucas asked for a marriage certificate he didn't have ready. I don't know, he said. He stopped answering 3 weeks ago. Beep. I assumed he'd taken the money and disappeared. People like that do sometimes. 3 weeks. The same 3 weeks since the account bearing his name had been created. I didn't say that part aloud. Not yet. Beep. Why didn't you tell me any of this when I woke up? Because the first thing you asked me was whether I was your husband. Adrienne said quietly. Beep. And I understood, somewhere in that hospital room, that if I told you I'd been secretly investigating your own life behind your back for 6 months, you would never trust a single word I said again. He looked at his hands. Beep. I decided a small lie now was survivable. A large truth wasn't. I was wrong. I wrote nothing down while he spoke. Beep. I watched instead the stillness of his hands, the specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't perform well under observation, the fact that he never once asked me to believe him. Later, alone, I opened the notebook. Adrienne admits deception. Beep. Deception explainable by fear, not concealment of guilt. Reyes, missing 3 weeks. Same the beneficiary account was created. Question. Was Reyes protecting me? Or was Reyes the one who staged the warehouse? Beep. I underlined the last line twice, then added one more sentence beneath it, in handwriting that felt less like discovery and more like memory finally catching up to instinct. Adrienne is not the answer. Beep. Adrienne is another question wearing the shape of one. Sophia found me still awake at midnight, the notebook open across my knees. You believe him? she said, not a question. Beep. I believe he's frightened of the same thing I am. I closed the notebook halfway. Beep. That's not the same as trusting him completely. As she sat on the edge of the bed, arms crossed, the posture of someone building a case in her head before she said it aloud. I keep thinking about the message, she said. You checked the wrong drawer. Beep. Whoever sent that knew you'd gone to Ashwood within hours of you going. Beep. That's not something Adrienne could arrange from a hospital corridor while we were driving there, unless he has someone else watching. Or, Sophia said carefully, someone already knew before we left this room. I sat up straighter. Beep. Walk me through it, I said. Exactly who knew about the key and when. She counted on her fingers, slow, methodical, the same instinct that had made her keep years of my sealed instructions without opening them. Beep. You told me about the key in this room this afternoon. Lucas wasn't here. He'd gone to get coffee. Adrienne wasn't here at all. She paused. I called Daniel from the car, on speakerphone with the windows up. Beep. No one else was in the vehicle. So only you, Daniel, and I knew before we reached the warehouse. Yes. And the message arrived 4 hours after we left it. Yes. I looked around the room. Beep, beep. Really looked. The way I hadn't allowed myself to since the first day, when every object had simply been evidence of a life I couldn't remember, rather than a life someone might currently be watching. Beep. The flowers Adrienne had brought, wilting now on the windowsill. The notebook the original neurologist had given me, the one with a single sentence written on the first page in handwriting I'd never questioned. Record every recovered memory immediately. Beep. The bedside drawer Adrienne checked before he checked my face. Every single time he walked into the room. Sophia, I said slowly. What's supposed to be in that drawer? Nothing as far as I know. Hospital paperwork, a spare gown. I opened it. Beep. Paperwork, a spare gown, and tucked into the seam where the drawers in a drawer met its frame, success is small enough to been missed by anyone not looking specifically for it. A flat black disc, no larger than a coat button. Sophia went very still. Beep. Is that? I don't know, I said, but I know exactly why Adrienne checks this drawer before he looks at my face every time he walks in. He wasn't looking for something he'd hidden. He was checking whether it was still there. Beep. Daniel arrived within the hour, driven by Sophia, carrying a small device he described only as something that tells me what that thing is before I touch it. He confirmed it in under a minute. Beep. Audio transmitter, he said, holding it at arm's length like it might still be listening. Short range. Someone within the building has been receiving everything said in this room. Since when? I asked. Impossible to date precisely. Beep. But the battery type suggests it hasn't been replaced in at least 10 days. He looked up at me, which means it was likely already here before you woke up. The room went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Beep. Before I woke up, before Lucas ran through that door soaked in rain, before Adrienne claimed to be my husband and hesitated over a marriage certificate, before any of them had said a single word to me, someone had already been listening. Beep. The neurologist, I said quietly, the one who gave me this notebook. Sophia frowned. What about him? He told me to record every memory immediately. Beep. He told the room to write everything down. I looked at the small black disc in Daniel's gloved hand. Beep. He didn't need to plant a microphone. if he could simply ask me to say everything out loud and put it in writing where he'd have easy access. Daniel was already moving, laptop open, fingers fast across the keys. Beep. What's his name? He asked, exactly as it appears on his hospital credentials. Dr. Weller, Sophia said. I met him twice. He seemed. She stopped. He seemed what? I asked. Beep. Careful, she said slowly, as though only now hearing the word for what it was. Not warm. Careful. Daniel's search returned results within minutes. A medical license number, cross-referenced against the state board. There's a doctor. Beep. Weller registered, he said. License 14 years. Currently listed as practicing 200 miles from here at a clinic that has no record of him taking leave in the last 6 months. Silence. Beep. Then who, Sophia said, has been examining Anna every morning? Daniel turned the laptop toward us. A photograph taken from the real doctor. Beep. Weller's clinic website. A heavy-set man in his 60s. Gray-bearded. Nothing like the sharp-featured, silver glasses neurologist who had leaned over my bed on the first day and diagnosed me with a phrase I hadn't understood. Beep. Post-traumatic retrograde amnesia. The man who had told me memory reconstructs, fills gaps, mixes truth with emotion. Beep. Had, without ever raising his voice or asking a single suspicious question. Spent 11 days deciding exactly how much of my past I was allowed to recover. And in what order. Beep. I remembered, suddenly, the fragment from my second night. The female voice in the darkness, before I fully woke, whispering, if you're hearing me now, it means the memories are returning out of order. And the mention, only days later, of a girl named Emma, that had made my hand close hard enough to shatter glass. Beep. The mysterious girl the fake neurologist had mentioned. I had written that sentence in my own notebook without ever fully asking myself what it meant. Now I understood. He hadn't just been managing my recovery. Beep, beep. He had been the one deciding which parts of Emma I was permitted to remember, and when. We didn't confront him that night. Daniel's advice was simple, delivered without any of his usual calm detachment. Beep, beep. If he knows you've found the transmitter, he said, he'll assume you know about him too. The moment that happens, whatever plan he's operating on accelerates. Beep, beep. We move first, or we don't move at all. Sophia was already on the phone with a colleague, someone outside the hospital, someone who could arrange a discreet transfer under a different name before morning rounds. Beep. Lucas returned just after 1 a.m, see, and I watched the exact moment the room's new truth reached him. The small black disc on the table. Daniel's laptop still open to a stranger's real face, the careful way none of us were speaking above a whisper anymore. Beep. How long, he asked, has someone been listening? Since before I woke up, I said something moved behind his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not fear for himself. Every conversation, he said slowly. Every theory. Beep. Every piece of evidence we laid out on this bed. He looked at me. He's had 11 days to prepare for everything we were going to say before we said it. Which means, I said, we've never actually been ahead of anyone in this story. Beep. Not once. Nobody argued with that. At 2:15, a nurse I didn't recognize knocked once and let herself in without waiting for an answer, carrying a small tray of medication I hadn't been prescribed. Beep. Time for your evening dose, she said, too brightly. Too fast, in a voice that didn't match the exhaustion on every other face in that hallway. At this hour, I looked at her name badge, then at Sophia, then at the tray. Beep. I thought of the first nurse on the very first day, the one who had rushed in relieved to relieved when I opened my eyes for the first time, before anyone had told her whether I would remember my own name. Beep. I don't think I've met you before, I said carefully. I just started this rotation. Her smile didn't move the rest of her face. Doctor. Beep. Weller asked me to make sure you took this before midnight. Lucas stepped forward, casual, easy, blocking her path to the bed without appearing to block anything at all. She already took her medication, he said. An hour ago. The nurse hesitated. Beep. Half a second. The same half a second, Adrienne had hesitated over a wedding certificate on the first day. The same half a second, I was learning, finally, to read the way other people read a clock. Beep. I'll check the chart, she said, and left without checking anything. The door had barely closed behind her when Sophia grabbed her phone. That transfer needs to happen now, she said. Not in the morning. Beep. Now. I looked around the rooms that had held me for 11 days. The bed, the drawer, the notebook I'd been told to fill with every returning memory, the window Adrienne always stood beside instead of sitting close, and understood, with total and terrible clarity, that I had never once been recovering in a place of safety. Beep, beep. I had been recovering inside the trap itself, watched, measured, and gently guided toward exactly the memories someone wanted me to find, in exactly the order they wanted me to find them. Whatever I did next, it couldn't happen here. Beep. I closed the notebook, slid it beneath my hospital gown against my ribs, and reached for the clothes Sophia had already begun pulling from the closet. Where are we going? I asked. Nobody answered right away. Beep. Because for the first time since I'd opened my eyes in that white room and asked a stranger who am I, all four of us understood the same thing at once. Beep. Nowhere was going to feel safe again until we found the person who had decided, twice now, that I wasn't allowed to survive. Finding out the truth. Beep. Sophia's colleague answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep, and agreed to open a property he managed 20 minutes outside the city. An empty apartment above a shuttered bookstore, no lease in anyone's name, keys under a loose brick by the back stair. Beep. You have maybe an hour before the overnight charge nurse notices you're gone, Daniel said, already packing his laptop into its case. After that, someone calls Dr. Weller's office. The real one or the fake one, it won't matter. Beep. Either way, the clock starts. I dressed quickly, notebook pressed flat against my ribs, beneath my sweater, the brass key from Ashwood zipped into the smallest pocket I owned. Lucas checked the hallway first. Twice. Clear, he said, and we moved. Beep, beep, beep. The corridor at that hour belonged to no one's. A single, orderly mopping near the vending machines that gleamed as hums of monitors behind half-closed doors. Our own footsteps too loud against the tile, no matter how carefully we placed them. Beep. We reached the stairwell without seeing the false nurse again. That should have felt like relief. It felt like something worse. The particular silence of a door left unlocked on purpose. Beep. Sophia's car waited in the far corner of the visitor lot, engine already running, headlights off. Everyone in, she said. Now, I took the back seat beside Daniel. Beep. Lucas, in front, watching the mirrors instead of the road. For the first several minutes, one hand resting near the door handle, as though he expected to need it. We were 4 blocks from the hospital when he spoke. Beep. We're being followed. Sophia's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Which car? Gray sedan, 2 cars back. It's held the same distance since the second light. Could be nothing. Could be's, Lucas agreed. Turn left here anyway. She did. Beep. The sedan turned left as well. 60 seconds later, holding its distance with the kind of patience that didn't belong to an ordinary driver, heading somewhere ordinary. Nobody said anything for a long stretch after that. Beep. I watched the gray shape of it drift in and out of the side mirror, steady as heartbeat, and thought of the very first sound I'd ever heard in this life. Beep, beep, beep. Something following, patient, refusing to stop. Beep, beep. Sophia took 3 more turns that made no logical sense as a route to anywhere, cut through an alley behind a closed restaurant, and killed the headlights for 11 seconds, crossing an empty lot. Beep. When we came out the far side, the gray sedan was gone. We'd learned, all 4 of us, in different ways and at different costs, that the absence of a threat you can see is not the same thing as safety. Beep. The apartment above the bookstore was small, dust-smelling, furnished with nothing but a folding table and 2 mismatched chairs. Sophia bolted the door behind us and stood with her back against it for a long moment, breathing. Beep. We're clear, she said, not quite believing it herself. Beep. Daniel set his laptop on the folding table and opened it without sitting down, already rebuilding from memory and cloud backups. Everything Weller's people might now be trying to erase from the hospital's systems. Beep. Lucas stood by the single window, angled so he could watch the street without being seen from it. Beep, beep. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, notebook finally out of my sweater and open across my knees, and understood with a strange and heavy clarity that we had escaped one room only to arrive in another, exactly as small, exactly as watched, simply not yet proven to be. Beep. We can't stay here more than a few hours, Sophia said. This is a favor. Beep. Not a fortress. Then we use the hours, I said, to finish what we started before someone made sure we couldn't. I opened to a fresh page and wrote a single line at the top, steadier than I felt. The room was never safe. Neither is this one. Beep. Work anyway.